Hello friends, welcome to the Hydro Chronicle podcast with your host, Rich Hamilton.
Welcome back to the Hydro Chronicle podcast. On today's episode, I had the pleasure of talking to Simpa Carter. Simpa is a cannabis activist, a public speaker, a vlogger, chair of Durham City Cannabis Club, a freelance writer, as well as a down-to-earth, well-articulated, super intelligent guy. I had the best time talking to this guy. He really is informed and he knows his stuff. Introducing the awesome Simpa Carter. Welcome to the podcast, buddy. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having us, Rich.
Yeah, no problem. So, could you tell us a little bit about your organisation and what you're trying to do in the UK at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I started Durham City Cannabis Club, one of the many emerging cannabis clubs here in the UK, back in 2016. I've been sort of slugging away ever since, trying to figure out how to ethically and morally create a cannabis social space where people could come and consume, congregate, and feel a sense of community. It's been rather difficult, obviously, it being a black market industry, meaning that various venues don't want to touch us. There are a lot of people in the community that see us as, well, druggies and degenerates, and that we're going to kind of mess up the fabric of society, which is really not the case. I mean, we've been blessed to be given a space here today, the Cannabis Club Hub, which we have staffed with a few different clubs from around the UK. We've got Bristol and Lincoln, and Milton Keynes as well as Durham, all operating under similar sort of models, but there isn't really a base model that everyone works around. Say like the pub of cannabis has not yet been discovered anywhere in the world. People are trying in America, in Canada with social consumption. Obviously in Europe we have the Spanish model, which is then, I think there's 5 total models which have been adapted by NCOD, the European Council for the Normalisation of Drugs. And we're just trying to figure out what works for Durham, so then we can create a base model to give to the other clubs. Basically, I want to see the kind of thing, the club and the social space I want to visit in every town and city centre.
Right. So with this social space, would that actually be then a physical club?
Yeah.
What would that look like physically? So would there be a license? Would there be sort of membership? Would you be able to just drop in? Is it?
Yeah, we operate as a private members club. So
right.
we are very proud of the fact that we operate to GDPR regulations. So
yeah.
we keep our members' data safe. It's one of the up and foremost things that we try to ensure is that if people are going to give us very sensitive information, that we have to be able to keep it safe. We obviously need this information to be able to titrate the services the clubs provide to members.
Yeah.
We operate a multi-tiered membership, so there is the supporters member, which anybody can sign up to from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Give us £10 a year and you get a membership card and you get to be supporting the club. For £30 a year for the full black card, you get all of the discounts, working with all the affiliates, various companies around the country and the world, getting discounts on products and services.
Yeah.
You also then get access to the drop-in and the members hub that we're building. At the minute, we've only got one venue that we're using once a month at the minute as a public drop-in, so people can sign up. As our membership improves and as we grow, we're seeking to use the space every week there on a Tuesday. It's a wonderful location. They're giving us it's a dojo and a cafe, so we're actually going to have medicated yoga and art classes. It's going to be a really bespoke area. What I'm trying to create with this, for all it is a cannabis club, it's a social hub where people are allowed to consume cannabis.
Okay.
It basically plasters over that giant crack that's been created in most people's personalities by prohibition. So instead of them thinking they're a bad person and they need to hide away their drug consumption and be in a shameful dark room, we want to be a bright, vibrant, open, welcoming space where everybody from all walks of life, as long as they're over 18, they've shown us ID and they've signed up to memberships, then we want to be able to provide them that kind of community and that kind of space that we feel is desperately lacking under prohibition.
Definitely, especially in the UK. I was in Spain last year. Went to a couple of the clubs over there in Spain and it was great, and then when I come back to the UK after being in those clubs, it almost feels like we're sort of going back in time. It's a bit crazy.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I've travelled a lot out to Spain, to Barcelona predominantly, obviously to the main point where all the clubs are.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's experiencing the high end and the quality and attention to detail that these clubs have really put in. It's not just a dark room where people can, we've extracted the smoke or whatever. They've really put something into it. They're themed, you know what I mean? They're wonderful social spaces, even if you don't consume cannabis, to hang around with, because the diversity of the demographics of people that attend these places mean that you're going to have some amazing conversations. You're going to meet some very unique characters and really enjoy yourself.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I went Cannabis last year, for example. I was over there for a week. I visited most of the clubs out there, and it was really social. That's what I found. It was super social. So even just sitting there, people strike up conversation, and it's like-minded people that are all talking. It is that social space. How does that look like in the UK with, obviously, the Barcelona clubs? You become a member, you pay your fee, you top up your card, and then you can purchase cannabis or medicine and various other bits and bobs. How do you see that sort of in the UK? Would that be the same sort of model, or are you looking at sort of a social club where people can bring their own and just socialise?
A bit of both. I mean, as part of our membership, we actually are setting up a system called therapeutics. So you can be a therapeutic consumer. We don't believe in the medical paradigm. I believe that cannabis has been weaponized against the people under the guise of pharmaceutical drugs. So it is the sense that they are patenting nature, they are creating processes so that they can profit massively from a continuation of prohibition. What we're seeking to do is empower the individuals to become members. We work with hydro shops to give people discounts. We work directly to give people setups. We have access to clones and seeds from companies from around the world. We are truly trying to create self-sufficient individuals. It's not trying to create some new Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme. It's not about enriching the people, it's about enriching the community. So the way Durham is set up as a non-profit, all of the money goes back into the community. Everything we do funds within itself. We are fortunate enough to benefit from some sponsors that will sponsor events and various things that we do that help fund this, but ultimately we are moving towards self-sufficiency through supply. It's the only way that we can regulate our own supply. At the minute, members turning up and they could be smoking some Stardog they've picked up off Mike down the road and it's giving them a bit of a headache. So we can't then tell what's wrong with that. Obviously, how's it been grown? Is it there been excess fertilizers left in it? You know what I mean? Has it been left to go moldy, so it's actually then dangerous to the lungs? These things like aspergillosis and that can actually cause psychosis. So in order for us to reduce the potential harms of prohibition, not of cannabis, we need to regulate and supply our own cannabis. Obviously, that's a massive grey area because we don't have the protections that the Spanish do. So under Spanish law, the emphasis is on private life. What you do as a private citizen in your private home isn't the opinion of the government. They fought wars over this, whereas we didn't. We very much surrendered our freedom to the state in the UK. So we don't have that protection. The clubs operate, so you have 500 members, you're allowed 1,000 plants. That's your discretion, 2 plants per person, worked out in a precedent set in a court case. So that's kind of protected as it stands. Some of the regions are fighting against this, but ultimately that's the model that works. We don't have that in the UK. We've had a few precedents set by people like Mark and Leslie, who were recently not acquitted, but basically their case was thrown out in Carlisle. We've a few other people that are challenging charges around the UK, and if we can get that one precedent which allows for any form of personal consumption, we can use the same mechanism by saying we have 100 members. With those 100 members are going to grow 200 plants to serve their own needs. We're going to grow it to the best quality. We're going to ensure that everybody involved can be accredited as well, because it's not just about us supplying ourselves today. As you can see, as a lot of other people that are listening will understand, the market is evolving, so global ubiquitous re-legalization of cannabis is inevitable. It will happen in my lifetime, even in Singapore, even in places where the death penalty still stands. It will change. It is inevitable. So we as people need to get onto the right side of history and start planning for that. So I want to see the members that we've got that have been guerrilla growing for 10 years, facing 14 years in prison to serve their community, have accreditation so they can get a 40, 50, 60, 80 grand job in the future. Because they deserve recompense. They deserve to be rewarded for what they have done with the risk under prohibition. They've served their community far more than, with the greatest respect, a lot of the companies that have turned up here today to continue profiting from prohibition rather than seeking to end it.
I couldn't agree more with you, if I'm completely honest with you. Well, it's just thanks to people like you and clubs like yourself, non-profit organisations that are doing the right thing and sort of blazing the trail for the rest of the country in order to follow. It must be hard work.
It's exhausting. It really is. I've had some interesting conversations. I've been blessed in the sense that since I've worked in this community, I've travelled the world quite a bit.
Yeah.
I consider myself good friends with a lot of people in various places around the world, so I know a lot of things. I'm informed far more than I should be in a lot of ways. This then benefits me though, because I can make smarter decisions.
Yeah.
It's frustrating in the sense that I can't then inform the rest of the British public of how to protect themselves against what is effectively racketeering going on in this country. And the best way I can seek to serve that is through recording these podcasts, having these conversations. Again, I'm lucky enough to speak on the main stage today. Yeah. I've just spoke to one of the main organisers, the guy that's booked me, and I basically said, is there anything you want me to avoid, the usual thing? And he said the same as he said kind of last year, be respectful and don't shit on anybody that's paid money to be here.
Yeah.
Which I can understand, but at the same time, I've been brought here today to challenge the status quo, to ensure that the people who are wandering around here with the greatest of respect, that still look at us as druggies, that will walk past a few people having a joint outside and kind of go, while being in the cannabis industry, in the CBD and hemp industry.
It is a juxtaposition, isn't it? It's kind of like you can't have one without the other, and I think that's where the conflict is at the moment. I was speaking yesterday with somebody, and they were saying, they asked me a question, and it was, obviously there's Hemp and CBD. We're at the Hemp and CBD Expo recording the podcast, and why isn't there more sort of hydroponics industry here? Why aren't the nutrient companies here? Why aren't those people that are making millions and millions of pounds here in the UK actually representing the community and showing them what it is? And I think it's because they've made some of them, not all of them, some of them made an awful lot of money off the back of it, and they don't want regulation to come in. They know it's going to come in. It's just a case of making money whilst you can, because as soon as regulation does come in, say for a nutrient company, for example, they're going to have to regulate their products, and that's going to cost them money. They're going to have to take what products they do have on the shelf, which some of them don't even say that they're for ornamental use, and they're going to have to take those down, and it's going to cost them money.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself lucky to work with a few, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to put them in the spot, a few hydro shops in the north that support me greatly.
Yeah.
Has a lot of time for me, has connected me with a lot of people in the industry, because as an activist and as someone who openly flaunts the law daily, basically, as a way to show the hypocrisy of the current legislation, it makes the hydro industry nervous, because exactly that. They know they're making majority of their money from a black market cannabis sales, but they don't want to challenge or change the status quo. What I have managed to get a few of them in the north to do, and a few others that are starting to listen, is to recognize that if they don't get on our side now and fight for a regulatory model that benefits them as a cottage industry, they're going to be obliterated. Look at what's happening in Canada. The big boys, the huge agricultural companies are going, well, we're basically the home base of Canada. We want to sell cannabis plants and nutrients on aisle 40. When it goes to true normalization through legalization like that, we lose the... I mean, think of all the packaging on nutrients. Think of the culture. I mean, think of like Autopot Summer Social. The culture and community that comes with this that will be obliterated if we move towards international conglomerates just chucking billions down and buying everything up. That's what I'm nervous about, is the entire industry. There's very little culture here today, if you know what I mean. Everybody's very business, very well dressed, and very nice branding. My girlfriend noted earlier that everything's green. You know, you'd think more than that. We're going to be a CBD company. What should we do? Right, we want a nice font and green. Job done.
Yeah, that's the thing in America at the moment. Is the model. It's sort of the marketing not to do is to go. If you have a canna company or a CBD company, it's not to go green, because everybody has green in their logo or brown, and they're sort of it's so you just see it again and again and again, and it's a bit of a stereotype, I think, and the UK haven't got to that stage yet. They're still in that infancy.
It almost feels like we're kind of photocopying other people's examples, and then by the time we're photocopying a photocopy of a photocopy, so then by the time the model comes to us, we've got such a distorted view of it. So this is why predominantly the companies in here are white labelers. They are companies that are white labeling from effectively 4 or 5 people. When you really look at the isolate game on the international level, it's a few companies are doing all of this, and they're being able to extract for pence, less than pence per gram. And then you look at the average price in some of the products, and if you walk around today, you can see that I'm paying an extra £10 because of your logo. I'm paying an extra £5 because of your stand. We're missing the point of it. Cannabis doesn't actively need marketing in the same way we do other products. We just need to tell the truth. Yeah. If we can talk about the endocannabinoid system, if we can talk about its direct effects, if we can talk about all the evidence we already have. Cannabis is already one of the most studied plants in human history, yet every politician stands at the pulpit and says, we need more studies to determine the effects of this. We don't. We just need to demystify, destigmatize. And if we had that neutral standpoint, the whole industry would thrive, because it would increase the consumer base, but it would also increase innovation. It would increase inventions and new creations of cannabis technologies, which is ultimately where this industry needs to get. We need to get past it as a drug. We need to get past it as a medicine. We need to get past it as something that we ingest. And we need to actually get to the point of it can save the world. As a carbon sequestration technology, it's unsurpassed. It remediates soil. It removes heavy metals. It removes nuclear waste. You know what I mean? It negates the petroleum paradigm. We can literally build supercapacitor batteries better than lithium from it now. We can grow the future. Or we can continue in this scarcity paradigm of, well, no, this product, because of our packaging and our marketing, you have to pay X amount for. When I want to empower the consumer to go, does CBD work for you? Here's a seed, go home. It's a weed, it will grow. You know what I mean? I have seen some people grow weed in places where lettuce wouldn't grow. Do you know what I mean? It's just, if you have the love and the attentiveness to it, you can put millions down in a grow, or you can chuck some in your back garden. Either way, you're going to get a product out of it that's going to be of use to you. If you then choose to utilize it in the way that's best effective, You can get that medicine, you can get that safe recreational drug, you can get the fibres, you can then get all of the other material from it.
Is the government doesn't, well, I believe, it's my opinion, that I don't think the government wants that necessarily, because they want to tax it. They want to tax it just like they did with alcohol, just like they did with tobacco. Obviously, over recent years, tobacco, and rightly so, has had a bad press. There's lots of people that are not smoking like they used to do. When I was younger, everybody smoked. It was crazy. But now, nobody smokes. None of the younger generation are smoking, so they're losing those huge profits.
But they are all moving to vaporising.
They are.
So you've got school kids that are just moving straight to vaporization, and that I disagree. That's a problem I see as a problem with marketing. So they took a harm reduction tool, they pushed the legislation and got it through with, oh no, it's to reduce harm and risk and etc. And we still don't know the long-term effects of VGPG. We still don't know the long-term effects of what we're actually doing with this. We're just seeing that, oh well, that's causing less deaths. And it's the same kind of problem I see with cannabis and the CBD industry, is they've gone, because CBD isn't psychoactive, CBD is psychoactive, they just market it that way. They mean it's not psychotropic, it doesn't cause euphoria or dysphoria, whereas THC can for people. It can make you very euphoric or very separate and distant. We know this, but that's about the responsibility of the individual to titrate their use. But by using that as an excuse, they've managed to create an entire industry out of marketing non-psychoactive cannabinoid.
Definitely. Well, how do you see the future in the UK at the moment? Do you think it is going to go pharmaceutical, or do you think that it's going to move away from flower to a tablet form? I've had a lot of conversations, and it seems to be sort of divided. The grassroots people that have been in it from the start, that have been campaigning and have been pushing, they think it's flower will rule ultimately, and there's another sort of vein that are thinking that it's going to move away from flower and it will come down to a dosage tablet or some sort of dosage consumable in that sense. How do you see it?
I suppose I'll answer this in two words. I'll answer it in how I unfortunately see it to be and how I hope it to be. So we'll go with the latter first. How I see it to go is because of the stranglehold of certain regulatory bodies and conglomerates of individuals within the industry, they're setting regulation. Things like the First Wednesday Club in London, and these are the boys' clubs where businessmen in suits get together and carve up the industry via the weaponization of regulation, means that, yeah, we're going to see patented, profitable products and pills. We're going to see copyrighted things like tinctures and shit. So then if, as black market organizations like the clubs, if we still have to fight under an air quotes legal paradigm, but we're still criminalized, we could then face lawsuits for copyright infringement, you know what I mean, for breaking patents. So that's where I think we're going to end up as it currently goes. I hope to galvanize enough of the public to recognize that this is just the latest thing that they're going to steal from us. It's the latest liberty we will lose under the guise of freedom. We need more people to be as informed as possible to make active decisions. At some point, ultimately, I'd love to see it go to a referendum. I think would be the best way for it. A referendum where we could actively get everybody from all walks of life campaigning about this and just inform the public and then make that one decision. Ultimately, I think if the government legalizes it, as it currently stands, because of, I'm going to try not to libel myself here, because of certain entities from former organizations now within government, yeah, certain companies are going to get that first step in the door. We've already seen that with GW's cartel. We've already seen that with what's happening with certain Canadian pharmaceutical companies being given preference and first dibs on NHS. So that's where I think it's going to go. I would love to see it go where we kind of go, okay, if it is a medicine, it is all capable of all of this stuff, and it's never killed anybody, what's the harm in the flowers? If people want to smoke the flowers, even if we call it harm reduction, so we allow CBD flowers to proliferate because we know that in clinical studies it reduces craving for tobacco by like 30%. That's a better harm reduction tool. You know, because smoking CBD weed also reduces the need. You don't want to smoke it as much. Whereas a THC drug, you really savor it. So that was what I said to my chief constable before he retired. He said, "What one thing could we do as police?" And I said, "Let CBD flowers proliferate. Outside every shop, if you had teenagers queuing up to, oh mate, would you go get us a 20 bag of OG Kush, and it's 0.5% THC? Why would you not let that proliferate?" You know, I would love to see a responsible legislation and regulation based on best practice, not on a centuries-long stigma, not on a centuries misinformation and bullshit. You've got people in power that make decisions that are so ill-informed, and you've got some of the people that their policies are putting in prison that could lead this industry. There's people, again, I'm not going to name, there's people I know that now run serious hydro companies that were in prison for growing cannabis, but are now legitimate heads of industry that have now got seats at table in government for setting agricultural policies. We need to recognize that the criminal record of the people that we've persecuted under prohibition, that is actively their CV. You know what I mean? If these guys, oh my God, that guy turned over how much from 1,000 plants? I want him growing my industrial size, 10,000 grow. These are the kind of things that we need to see moving forward. But I'm scared that we're going to see like we saw in Canada, where they locked out the emeries. They locked out people that actively fought to get legalization by opening the shops and showing the public that it wasn't a danger. It was actually a net benefit to the community. We're then legally barred from operating shops. It is, and I'm scared that that same blacklist could occur in the UK with the clubs, the other non-profit organisations that are actively rallying for everybody to profit and benefit from this plant, not just the corporates.
Yeah, definitely. I think if there was a referendum now, it would be a lot closer than it was a year ago or 5 years ago, a lot closer. So we're kind of heading in the right direction.
I'd say so. Just too slowly for then. Each day somebody goes to prison. Each day somebody dies. Each day a kid suffers. Each day, you know what I mean, somebody is in a morphine coma. There's a billion reasons why we need to fight this today, whereas unfortunately I feel a lot of the bodies that have been self-appointed and created themselves to regulate, I'm air quoting, to regulate and to govern cannabis are only there to ring-fence their own self-interests and to fortify their long-term goals. So whereas if we had a full decriminalisation, I call it re-legalised, because you can't have legalisation without decriminalisation. Legalisation, where, like Canada, where you've gone from 7 laws to 45 new laws, is Prohibition 2.0. You've extended it. If I walk down the street in Montreal with 31 grams, that's 5 years in federal prison in a legal country. They still haven't figured out, we're nearly 2 years down the line, they still haven't figured out how is the safe, air quotes, safe way is their wording, to transport cannabis in your car. You can get a DUI for having cannabis open in your car. It's a very ambiguous term what open means. Is it still in the Sealy bag you got from the shop? What if the shop hasn't followed the protocols of that provenance? You're going to face prison for that. You're going to face losing your license. They still haven't determined where is detection versus impairment either. So if you've got cannabinoids in your system, and we know if you're a heavy consumer, I can stop for 3 days and I'll still test positive at a roadside test. That does not mean I am impaired. So we can't have legalization that is only the weaponization of legislation for monopolization. Sorry, that was a lot of Asians. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
I get it.
So,
I get it, 100%.
A legal market can only come with what the individual consumer does is always decriminalized. If my house, say a 4-bedroom house, if I can fill that with 100 plants, for me that shouldn't be a problem to the state. Granted, the tax may be, if I'm then selling it on the black market, I should somewhere pay some form of tax to the system. But if I'm not robbing my electric, if I'm paying my newts, if I'm a good neighbour, if I'm not damaging the property, I don't see that being an issue for the constabulary. It shouldn't be for the state at all. Whereas what they do on a corporate level, where you then start extracting tens of thousands, yes, there needs to be this stringent regulation. But for what a personal consumer is doing at home, that barely needs regulating. That needs best practice through education, not through legislation.
And that's key, I think, best practice. I see it as kind of, for the future, maybe going towards that sort of homebrew. You know, you can have homebrew. A lot of people that I know make their own homebrew, whether it's beer or wine or liquor or whatever it is. And there's no government rules or regulations on that. But you still can go to Sainsbury's or wherever.
Well, you just made me think that. I was thinking, so how do we do the tax on that? You pay the tax on the equipment. We already do with cannabis. So right now, as a grower, you pay tax on your seed, tax on your feed, you pay tax on your electric, you pay tax on your tent, you pay tax every single way to the point of it. Yeah. And you can have all of it set up, lights on, soil, and it's all legal until you germinate that seed in the ground. The hypocrisy of that is beyond measure. When you really see, you can go and buy and fund your economy, and you look at, again, as we were discussing hydro shops before, it is the cannabis industry that funds them. The people who are then growing ornamental vegetables and trees and whatnot, they're not going to hydro shop. Well, some of them are obviously that are doing indoor, say, chili grows and herbs and whatever else. But predominantly, the non-cannabis consumer isn't patronizing hydro shops. Yeah. So again, it's another way that they can seek to diversify it is by almost marketing towards that angle.
And I think that's great as well, the fact that they're making their money on the tax, on the equipment. So that's where they make the money. The government love a tax.
So then that literally just changed what I'm going to be fighting for moving forward. Then ultimately, yeah, we were already paying tax. We just need legitimization through decriminalization. So in the sense that the average person needs to know that they're not going to get 10 men armed to the teeth at 5 a.m, kicking their door in, treating them like a dangerous thug for growing 2 plants in their back garden. I think when we can get to that point, I mean, that doesn't even have to come through legislation. We can have deprioritization like you've seen in a few regions where the police have just kind of gone, it's not our responsibility. Anything over a large commercial scale, which according to the Crown Prosecution Service is 27 plants, then they kind of have to target. If you're a bad neighbour, for example, if you're committing antisocial behaviour and the police know you grow, the way they can stop your antisocial behaviour is raiding your grow. So that's what they're kind of discretionarily doing in some regions. But ultimately, the best way we could go forward is what the Dutch did for 40 years and just kind of go, fuck it. We're not going to sign any new laws. All we're going to do is not enforce the current law. We're going to do trial periods. It's taken them about nearly 40 years and they've lost billions in tax from not regulating it, but they're now doing experiments, an 8-year experiment in a few regions of the government supplying. Because that's the way that they can then get the revenue from the larger scale grows. Because at the minute, most of the hydro shops that I know, they're supported by Albanian gangs, triad gangs, you know what I mean? These people that move into an area and go, right, we're going to set up 10,000 plants here, 10,000 there, and they crash the market. So the people that have been growing, Dave, who's grown for 15 years and supplied 2 towns, always been a good guy, always puts his money back in the community, raised his kids, they're decent people, you know, being an active member of that society. These guys then turn up, put 500 quid less on a box than him. He can't afford to operate anymore. So we've also got to consider what the consequences are of any given move. So a lack of regulation means that we're regulated by the criminal market. Over-regulation by corporation means that there is no space in the middle for everyone else, so we actually amplify the size of the black market.
Yeah, and that's going to cause problems as well. If it's running by the black market, like you say, like various gangs or cartel management, it's going to cause issues not just in that black market, but it's also money. All that money is going out of the country, it's not staying in the country, and that's a problem in itself.
Yes, I mean, the issue I often say to people is we have a problem with thugs in tracksuits and business suits, because they're all taking money from our shores, whether it's an offshore account or it's into another country or it's removed out of the economy, as it were, because it's then in an illegal economy. We're still taxed on this. David Cameron and George Osborne valued the drugs and sex trade in the UK in 2011 at 11 billion. So we ended up paying 1.1 billion in tax to the EU. So we're already taxed on this industry. So then when you really start to look at it that way, same with what we just discussed about home growing, they're getting the best of both worlds. So they're already generating revenue from a behavior and cycle that they are actually controlling through criminality. Because, I mean, there's corruption in the police forces in every county. We know this. There has been, like, Operation Tiberius found, I think it was 46 police officers actively would let people get away with murder for the right price. This was an operation done inside the police in, I think it was 2010, something like that. So we know there's corruption at all levels, and the more money that's then pumped into this, be it through the criminal side of it, or the legal criminal side of it, as I would say, or the vulture capitalists, for lack of a better term, that money talks. So that then sways people's opinions on legislation. This then kicks that can down the road for that conversation about decriminalisation. So this is how we've ended up with a weaponization of the medical paradigm in this country. So they put kids with epilepsy on the front page of every newspaper, they put them on the radio and all the TV shows, they tugged at the heartstrings and got everybody real emotional about it, and then went, the only thing we can do is these patented products that have been created. And
yeah, they want their money. It's on an Excel document, isn't it? They want the bottom line, and they want to increase their bottom line. Yeah. I don't think, some of them, they don't really care who they stand on, they're just interested in the bottom line.
Yeah, but what I'd like to see is the people that are still criminalised, the people that are still terrified, the people that might even not hear this podcast, the people that wouldn't come to a show like this. You need to step out of the darkness. The future is brighter, but we have to get through this dim period of corporate cronyism. You know what I mean? We can get there eventually. Once they settle down and the big boys make their billions and they piss off, there will still be a cannabis community. There will still be a cannabis industry. And even if it takes us another 5-10 years on top of it, we will eventually rule it because we care about it. We love this plant. We want to protect it. We want to protect the community that has nurtured us and given us a safe space when society has tried to imprison us, has tried to say that we're bad people for the choices that we choose to make.
Do you think that the medical industry need to step up as well? Because I think that a lot of GPs, they're just, I don't know whether it's uneducated or misinformed, but you know, they seem to be prescribing drugs at a massively alarming rate for pharmaceuticals. Obviously here in the UK it's state NHS, so there's a state healthcare system, so it doesn't sort of work as the same models in America where they sort of, the doctors actually get bonuses when they're prescribing certain drugs to certain people. But here in the UK it's slightly different, but I still see an alarming amount of drugs that are being prescribed, and half of these drugs that are being prescribed for even small things like depression, well, it's not small, but you know, depression for example, they'll be on 2 drugs, either a citalopram or a beta blocker or something like that. Then they'll have to take 4 more prescriptions in order to combat the side effects of that. And before long, you can get lost very easy in that prescription world of drugs. Do you think it's lack of education or misinformation with the doctors?
I think it's the industry as a whole, I think, is misguided. Modern medicine, I think, is far too dependent on the pharmaceutical paradigm. So you've got an illness, okay, we can treat the symptoms of this illness. That's what most pharmaceutical companies do. They want to treat the symptom of an illness, not the illness. If you get rid of the illness, that destroys their industry that they've then spent billions in research and development creating those drugs. I think so. Because of that, they control the education paradigms. We then split up the NHS into trusts. The trusts became profitable organisations, so they have to seek profit to work. So then if a drug company then says, actually, if you use us over these, we'll give you X, Y, and Z, you can see how those incentives would entice the organisations. I think on the individual level with the GPs, most of them, I think, genuinely want to help. Yes. And because they have to look at their legitimate literature, that's triple-blind, placebo-controlled studies, etc., they physically can't look at the world of cannabis because it's too murky. Because of the endocannabinoid system and the unique nature of cannabis, even the molecules of cannabis act differently on the individual endocannabinoid system. It doesn't work in the same way that the pharmaceutical paradigm does, so they can't map it. So at the minute, I think most doctors go, I'd rather ignore that and stick with what we've proven, again, air quotes, proven, because they then feel that that's doing the best course. In their world, in their realm, all they're doing is listening to podcasts, reading books, going to lectures. All they're doing is learning about that narrow pharmaceutical paradigm. And then when they hear the thing of they watch something on ITV about weed, they're like, oh, well, maybe. But until the option is there for the GPs to actually give them access, I don't think it's going to incentivize them to research it, most of them. So I have heard anecdotal evidence from several people that have been to their doctors and said, look, here's X, Y, Z, what can we do? And they've kind of gone, well, have you tried cannabis? You know what I mean? So they're getting there, but it's the impotence of the doctor, I imagine, must be quite severe in the sense that they're going, this could help, but I can't talk about it. So they have to, in hushed tones, kind of go try this illegal drug. When it really shouldn't be that way. I mean, for me, cannabis should be the first line of defense. Look at what they did with epilepsy. So for epilepsy, even now as it stands at the NHS, they're not going to prescribe until you've had all possible treatments. Some of the treatments, one of them is effectively a lobotomy. It's brain surgery. You would rather that than a non-psychoactive or very low psychoactive balanced ratio cannabinoids tincture. I can't get my head around that, but because legality and morality is so intertwined in the fabric of our society, because it's illegal, it's immoral. That's the way people are operating. That's why CBD is exploding, because it's now, air quotes, legal. It's obviously there's a huge grey area around it, but in some form and parts it's legal. People are then going, it must be good, it must be right. So therefore they drop all of that stigma, all of the moralizing that they have, and suddenly go towards this thing. And I think then us doing destigmatizing and demystifying cannabis as a whole plant will bring us on leaps and bounds as a culture. Because once you end the war on cannabis, you end the war on drugs. You stop the idea of, you've got something in your system I don't like. When that's wrong. If you act a dickhead to me, regardless, pardon, I don't know if I can swear
That's
here.
okay, no problem.
If you act terrible to me as a person, I'm not then going to judge it on the fact that you're drunk or you're whatever. I'm going to treat it as you are. And that's the way we should be as a society. We should treat each other as you are as a human, not on what you do. Yeah, there are things you can do that can infringe on my freedoms and what I like, but then I can just express that I dislike that. Whereas the idea of me going, no, you're a bad person because you choose to lessen your emotional, spiritual, mental or physical pain through substance X, Y or Z, that is wrong in every degree. That is immoral.
Hypocrisy. I've got friends that they've been in jail, that unfortunately they've become addicted to harder drugs after being in jail for much lesser crimes, and now they're out. But they still, now that they're out, some of them have been prescribed morphine legally, and that just seems crazy because literally every one of them that I know has morphine. It's on prescription, and it's not a cure. It's just a cheap fix. It's just an extra. It's just them getting extra for free off the government.
I think in a lot of ways that what we're missing, and again, medicine misses this. You got your doctor and he doesn't go, how are you sleeping?
Yeah, what are you eating?
Yeah, you're spending time with your friends. Have you seen your family recently? You're taking time off work, you're relaxing. They're not interested in any of this stuff yet. We know it's a holistic approach. Anything we do therapeutically with cannabis with people we work with is we inform them, okay, you've got cancer. Change your diet, right? You need to start exercising slowly to encourage your endocannabinoid system, to encourage your metabolism. You need to start doing things that are good for your mental state, you know what I mean? But we miss that paradigm altogether, and I think the biggest reason we have such an epidemic of anxiety and depression in this country is disconnection. One of my favorite authors, Johann Hari, described it in a TED Talk, and he said that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So once we have a good family base, once you have a good stable friends and work colleagues and a nice life around you, if something goes wrong, your first inclination isn't going to be to try and escape from your life through taking a substance. It's going to be going and spending time with the people you love and feeling better, engaging in activities and doing things that will actively improve your mood.
Definitely, and eating healthy. like you said, it's the whole approach.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that cannabis ironically gives. It's the gateway for a better life, because cannabis, when you consume it for its psychoactive properties, for taking THC or CBN, it causes metacognition, introspection. You'll see people couch locked, and they'll look like there's nothing happening, but in their head they're going round and through some stuff. They're really working some shit out, and I think that's why I see people that have been quite fascistic, quite racist and xenophobic and just hateful people, then start smoking weed, and it just softens them, and they really start being, oh my God, I've been an arse, I've really... And they start to recognize the cycles of behavior they're stuck in. I think that's one of the most important reasons why I want to see cannabis proliferate in its psychoactive floral form, because the act of sitting with 5 or 6 strangers, rolling a joint, and by the time that's at a roach, you are friends. It doesn't matter what race you are, it doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are, what religious belief. If you've sat together, you've had a nice laugh about a joint, you've passed it around, the tradition and the ritual of it is what I want to seek to protect in this, that we don't lose the soul of cannabis. We don't lose the spirit that keeps us connected.
And unfortunately, that's what I see in America. There's obviously a few that have come through, but generally speaking, the people that have fought for the cannabis, or the war on cannabis as they love to call it, they're just sort of squashed. There's a few that obviously stick up, the celebrities and the brands and so on, but 9 times out of 10, everybody that's fought for the right thing, they've kind of been squashed by money, and it's taken the soul out of the industry.
It really has. You've seen this in the UK with the clubs. I mean, I've only been in this 4 years, but I've burnt out a couple of times. It's difficult because obviously there isn't any money in what we do, really. You can obviously then commit to selling at a larger scale and whatnot, but it's difficult to find. We're trying to find the line between being viewed as dealers and being viewed as leaders in an industry. Obviously, yeah, the implication in the law is we're dealing. Of course we are in that sense, but we're trying to serve a need to the community. We're trying to reduce the harm. We're not actively getting anybody that wouldn't already consume cannabis products to consume anything. We're trying to give them the best option. And I think that that's the best thing that we can do to try and combat losing that soul is the grassroots movements. So if we had, even if they remain underground, when it's legal and you have the Starbucks of weed, the McDonald's of weed, you'll still have these, for lack of a better term, dodgy back alley sort of back doors that you do a secret knock on and you can get in, and that's always going to proliferate. But I want to see that on the high street, because it is that sense of connection and community that will repair the wounds, the gaping wounds across the face of our society. Prohibition has caused far more harm to more than just the cannabis consumer. It's destroyed our environment, it's upped wealth equality, it's destroyed social equality, it's increased homelessness, it's ruined farmlands. You know what I mean? It is the crux, it is the seed that is growing the tree that overshadows our society.
I 100% agree with that. I think as well, with the legalisation of cannabis, say in the UK, it's going to clean up the rest of the act. So at the moment, it's a black market, and you go to your black market dealer, for example, and 9 times out of 10, he doesn't just do cannabis. He also does other things because it's the trade that is in. And I have one friend, personal friend, went to school with, and he smoked cannabis pretty much all of his life from sort of 16 onwards. And he got into harder drugs because of who he was actually purchasing his cannabis off. Gave him something a little bit extra. He was a little bit depressed at the time, he was at a weak moment, and what do you know, he's an addict, and he's out of that now, which is fantastic. But if he wouldn't have been going to that black market person, then he wouldn't have never have gone there. And that's just one person that I know as an example, but I'm sure that happens over the UK all the time.
Constantly. I did an interview, I can't remember who, with a few years ago, and we talked about this, and I call it exposure theory. They like to call it gateway theory, so that you try cannabis and then you get access to other drugs. But if you look at it as a point of exposure, if you go to a cannabis dealer, you have your mate Dave and he sells all the time, only weed. Somebody gets raided up the line, Dave doesn't have access to weed. You've got to go to Mike around the corner. He also sells, a bit of whiz, a bit of coke, a bit of whatever else. And then, you're tempted. The weed's not as good. You find out it's a Friday, a bit of a pick-me-up alongside. So because you're exposed to this, you're more likely to. Whereas, say, then we don't have... we keep alcohol in a separate aisle, for example. We keep sort of prescription drugs separate. We ensure through the way you access things how you consume them, if you know what I mean. So the self-titrating of consumption of alcohol in pubs. So the reason we have a binge culture at the minute is people are preloading at home because alcohol's cheaper to go and buy in supermarkets than it is in the social space. What we should be then looking at creating cannabis is making it so the social space is cheaper cannabis. The best quality possible, so it's consistency and continuity of strains. People can get access to it, they'll go consume it and then go home. So then it reduces them sitting at home consuming alone. Same thing has happened with alcohol, and we're closing 20 pubs a week in the UK at the minute. These social spaces are literally designed for cannabis. They've got booths, they've got pool tables, they've got darts, they've got the toilets segregated already, most of them got kitchens. You know what I mean? All you need to do is stick extraction equipment in there and figure out the licensing for it. It doesn't seem that difficult. What I'd like to see is dual licensing for drug premises. So a lot of the young people don't just not consume tobacco, they don't consume alcohol. I saw a study that said 25% of the young people they studied under 25, 25% of them were vegan, 25% of them were teetotal, didn't drink alcohol at all. Whereas if we use the same premises for dual licensing, say Monday through to Thursday it's a cannabis club, Friday, Saturday it's a Sunday it's a bar, You know what I mean? You're using the same premises, you can then control it in the same way because you have the same, you don't really need it, but you can have the same bouncers, the police would know the protocols and procedures. That would be the way to reduce any potential harm and consequence of consumption.
Definitely. As well, I think the social clubs offer another aspect away from the home. A lot of people, again, that I know that do partake in cannabis, they have families and they have young children, and sometimes they don't want to consume around those young children because the stigmatism around that surrounds it, with people coming in and out of the home. Where if you have a social club where you can go, you have a safe place that you can go, so you're not smoking down the alley, next to your house, or you're not sort of at the bottom of the garden or doing whatever. You're actually somewhere where you've gone to do something. You're an adult, so you should be able to do what you choose, and it's clean and it's safe and it's social.
Exactly. I mean, even just on that point, you think of all the times you look out of a window and you see somebody doing something dodgy. 9 times out of 10, they're going somewhere to do some drugs. You know what I mean? They're going to get their fix. They're going to do the thing. And obviously, I advocate as well for safe consumption rooms for all substances. But ultimately, it's about responsibility. And I think having that social space where you can build connections. I mean, we've only done our second drop-in at Durham, and we've got people that come back to the second one just to meet the people they met the first one. In the forms, when you sign up with the membership, we have these boxes where you tick what you want. The predominant box that's ticked is networking and meeting new people. We have people that, the oldest guy we signed up was an 84-year-old Christian who's now going to start doing drugs YouTube videos where he takes drugs and talks about them in Christ. Really interesting. But so it's a wide demographic of people. These are people that are like, I haven't smoked it in 5 years, but my back's bad and I really wanted to get, and they don't have access to the street dealers. They don't know a black market. For all we know, it's on every street. Some people just don't want to go to the guy in the hoodie who's acting dodgy. They don't want to have to deal with that criminality or that perception of criminality.
Also with the club as well, let's just pick a strain, Stardog, seems like quite a popular strain in the black market here in the UK. If you had a club where it was licensed, or you're going to get that strain where if you go to the black market guy, if he knows that he can get a little bit more money, say for a strain like Stardog, he'll get some lower level stuff and he'll say, oh, it's Stardog. Where if you had a social club where it was distributed or you was talking about it socially, you could actually talk about the effects of that, and that you would know that was that strain, so you would know, not all the way, not 100%, but you would know some of the effects about what that's going to do.
This is what we're seeking to do with mothering plants and holding clones, because then you get continuity of cultivars, which I think is massively important. That's one thing the pharmaceutical industry talks about all the time, is consistency. Obviously in flowers you do get variability even in crops, because of that's got slightly more light, that's slightly more moisture, etc. But the general profile of the plant will always be within a certain region, and as long as we can, we're seeking to work ideally with the university, because we've had conversations with them. They want access to weed, but they can't access weed. They're allowed to work with cannabis, but they can't access the cannabis. So if they could get street weed pushed in, they can test it, we can get the tests, and we can sell our stuff knowing it's safe, as it were. We can tell people what's in it. Yeah. Obviously then working with the people, we can tell, put on, same as like with Oregon, they actually have to put what nutrients we were growing in and what the medium was. That true accountability and traceability. I think, again, having that, it just ensures confidence in the market. So then if somebody goes, oh my God, again, just OG Kush, and they go, wow, this is amazing. This actually really clears up my anxiety as well as helping with my pain. Whereas then they smoke a different strain, and this actually, it gives me a bit of anxiety, but it helps my pain, and they're stuck with that strain. Yeah. So it's, having continuity and consistency of access to quality cannabis changes lives. I went from being agoraphobic, and my mental health history is well sort of documented, but I've been in and out of psychiatric care for 20 odd years. And it wasn't until I started growing my own cannabis and accessing certain strains and having that continuity that I was able to really address the underlying issues in my life and take responsibility for it and ultimately start to heal. Right. And that was from waking up one day and basically just like, no, I'm going to break the law. I'm not going to go and give £20 for a 1.8 20 bag when I can go and spend 40-50 quid over some months and get per ounce. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's logical. It really is just logical to become self-sufficient. And once you take that first step, and you see that plant and you spend time with it, the energy, the spirit of the plant, for lack of a better term, to sound a bit hippie, is amazing. One of my depression doctors when I was very young said, have you ever tried gardening? And it wasn't until I literally started growing my own weed and I went, I get it, because having that connection with it and then sitting and rolling that first joint of that cured weed once you've done it is an amazing feeling. Like, I did this. I nurtured this, I produced exactly. Yeah.
And it would be good to roll that out, sort of a gardening for people that have, like you say, mental health issues, or maybe children that are at school that are underachieving, or problem children, with whatever it is. It's easy to grow anything. And if you can get involved with growing from seed to finish, I think that's fantastic. That's rewarding within itself.
Well, I mean, there's people like Guy Coxell that I hear at the minute, and they're advocating obviously for the removal of the hemp licensing, and I agree. And I would love to see low THC cannabis grown by schools, by school kids. Like literally, I'm not even joking, because to have that, they could then extract the oils, could then be taken off for whatever else and used as a profitable venture for the club or community, wherever it is. But then the fibrous materials could literally be used for the textiles and materials used within the school. For those kids to watch something grow up and then have it broken down into all of these products, that is more invaluable than any lesson you were going to sit and regurgitate to them hour on hour in that building.
100%. There's a lot of people that aren't academic. It's as simple as that. Some people aren't academic, so when you go through the school system, I have children, they're going through the school system now. If you don't hit what they deem as academic, you'll fall behind and you're classed as a dummy. And that's not necessarily the case, because other people have strengths in other areas, and practical application, like growing plants or physical things, is massively important. I don't think it's focused on enough in the education system here in the UK.
Yeah, I think ultimately education in the UK is built for the workplace. You know what I mean? It's to make the average individual a passive consumer, someone that will get on with their lives, go get the 9 to 5, continue to contribute to the economy and spend money. Yeah. And they'll just kind of get through their lives and go to retirement and go, oh, well, that was fun.
Yeah, don't think. Yeah, don't be imaginative. Don't be creative. Do your job 9 to 5.
Yeah, blinkers on, head down, stick in the box. Whereas I consider myself lucky to have been one of those kids who wasn't academically inclined. I'm obviously quite an articulate person. I write, I do a lot of things, but I didn't do well in school for various reasons. And because of this, again, I felt like a failure for most of my life. I was like, oh no, I haven't got the qualifications, the little letters and numbers after my name, so therefore I can't do it. Then I discovered the legitimate cannabis industry as it was emerging, and I went, holy shit, I've got a talent in this. I've got a passion for this, and that passion far outweighs any qualification. Because there is no accreditation in cannabis as it stands, I am equally as placed as anybody else to achieve great things within this industry. And that's what I want to try and get people to recognize, that although it can feel a bit like, holy shit, there are these entities shadowing over us, they're just clouds, man. They'll blow by. The sun is always shining, and we've got the longevity of this. These guys that are just, I've created a CBD company. Yeah, nice. You're going to be profitable for a couple of years, then you have to rebrand and try and become a cannabis company. You know, so while they all falter and fumble and have to deal with it, the grassroots will keep growing strong. Since the start of Prohibition in the 20s in Egypt, man, there has been movements for people rebelling against this, and there will always be people rebelling against this, because they'll sit, smoke that first joint, look at their mate and go, why is it illegal, man? Why? They'll go to a mate's house and they'll see the plants and they'll look at it and they'll go, that's it? They'd lock you in a cage for 14 years for that little metal little box with those little plants in? Once people really see that and actually understand that, and are not just being programmed by the media and films and the sensationalist, well, frankly, police state that they're trying to enforce in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think as well that with the prison system here in the UK, it's privatised. So if they passed laws, then they're going to have to take those people that have been convicted and overturn those convictions in some cases. And if they do that, then the prisons are going to be a lot more emptier.
Well, this is why I think that they would do that at the same time they reform the laws. So they, air quotes, legalise, create those new laws, right. And then they go, okay, we're scrubbing you for that law, but you're actually still technically in violation of this law, so we're going to keep you in there. Right. But if you look at the big thing in America at the minute is the idea of reparations. Okay. So there's a few people looking at the idea of, we're calling it Cannabis PPI. So when the war on drugs is over, like over, there will be legal entities set up and established to sue world governments, to sue the UN for enforcing fraudulent legislation in the guise of the international treaties on drugs. And the people that then I lost 10 years of my life, go sue the government, you will due money back for that. Yeah. You have been incorrectly incarcerated. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. That is what they're stalling on in America. So this is why they've immediately gone, as soon as the state legalizes in some form for air quotes recreational, you need to let out the prisoners. You need to let them straight out. Then they're quietly going, just don't let anything happen. But in a legislative society like America, where people sue over falling off a toilet, as soon as that starts snowballing, the big boys will go, okay, let's establish one of these companies. And you'll hear it on the radio. Have you been affected by cannabis prohibition in the past 10 years? You can already see it coming, and that's what I think they're scared of. And the government, if they were smart about it, would legalize, start selling through distribution licenses, premises all over the country, taking a block of that tax revenue and start giving it back to the people whose lives they've destroyed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. That's perfect. And a great time to finish the podcast, Simpa.
Yeah,
it was
really
absolutely amazing for you to come on. It's brilliant talking to you on. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah,
for the people that are listening that want to find out more about you and what you're doing in the world, what's the best way that they can contact you?
You can find me personally as Simpa, S-I-M-P-A, activist, on Instagram and Facebook. You can follow Durham City Cannabis Club on Durham City Canna Club on Facebook, Durham City_CC on Twitter, Instagram, and we have the YouTube channel, which we're slowly putting more of our content on, which is Durham City Cannabis Club.
Awesome. What are you doing the rest of the year? It's obviously 2020. Have you got much planned this year?
Yeah, we're doing quite well. Like I say, we've secured that venue. We're moving towards taking Tuesdays there, doing some really unique sort of cannabis classes, educational talks, continuing to build the drop-in in our memberships. We're going to be looking to do another one of the big autumn expos at the end of the year. And just generally, I mean, it's difficult to kind of plot and plan in this industry because so much changes so fast. But ultimately, the base driver here is to build a strong membership within Durham, to finalise our model so that we can give it to the other clubs that want to operate a similar model and really start to see the clubs flourishing in the UK over the next sort of 18 months.
That's awesome. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
No worries, thanks for having
Cheers,
us.
buddy.
Cheers.
I loved speaking to Simpa Carter. I just wanted to say a personal and a huge thank you again to Simpa for coming on the Hydro Chronicle podcast. Thank you, buddy, and we'll catch up soon. Today's show was brought to you by the Hemp and CBD Expo. We recorded the podcast at the show and would like to give a huge thank you to the whole team. Give them a follow on social media at Hemp and CBD Expo and check out what their team are doing next at www.hempandcbdexpo.com. Thanks, guys.